Hello, welcome everyone. Today I'm going to demonstrate how to print a alternative relief surface. So this is a technique that I kind of accidentally stumbled upon, and here's a finished print example. I did a series of these a few years ago, and like I mentioned, I accidentally stumbled upon this process. So this was one of the materials that I put in your packet for printmaking DIY at home during the self-quarantine or isolation. And this is just standard blue builder's foam that you can get at Home Depot or Lowe's or any kind of building supply store. You have to be somewhat careful with the surface because it's fragile, so if you were to press hard on it or drop something on top of it, it would leave an indentation. And so for our finished print, it's going to be the relief surface or whatever's raised that will print, and we'll ink this up. And the relief areas, the lower areas, will stay the white of the paper. So I'm going to walk you through this process so you can be able to do this at home. And I'm going to show you a little bit of the tools that you will need and the materials to do this. So first of all, you'll need the builder's foam. I have a spoon to be able to use for the pressure when I'm inking up my matrix. I have a brayer or a roller to use. I have ink, and I sent y'all home with water-based ink, so this is some Speedball block printing ink. Since it's relief, this will work really nice. And then I have a place to be able to roll out my ink, a slab. You guys all have mat board that you have in your packet to be able to roll the ink out. Now, some of the tools and materials that you might want to use for making impressions on this, and this is the little sample piece that I made. You can use any sort of textural materials like you see in this image here, this grate-like image. For this texture here, here's a, you never thought you'd use this for printmaking, but here is a handy-dandy pizza roller that can cut lines and they would be recessed. I also have this scoring tool for sewing, and if you rub a texture back and forth over top of the matrix of the blue foam, it will be like these red marks that you can see in the section there. So as you make those impressions, they are going to be lower and not raised up, and so they won't ink up. You could also use things like lace or doilies, textural items, and you can also paint, which is really nice on this surface too. So that's some of the materials that you will need. I also have a few sheets of paper already cut to size so I can print this block when I'm done. Another thing that's handy is gesso. So I have some gesso here and a brush because you could entirely make your image brushed first. So imagine here I'm brushing a portrait or something here with gesso. And what the gesso does is it acts as a stop out. It acts as a mask. So what's really interesting about this process, and you can kind of see it here, is like I mentioned, I accidentally stumbled upon this. You can see where the spray paint has eaten away at the builder's foam. So I believe that's one thing I failed to mention. And I'm, of course, going to spray paint back here. But another thing that is handy to have for this is spray paint, because this is going to do the action or the carving into the block for us. Instead of having to use a gouge to carve into our matrix or material, the spray paint is going to eat away at this builder's foam. And this creates a little bit of off-gassing, so it's good to do this in a vented area or to wear a mask or obviously spray outside. Don't do this indoors if you don't have a vent back home. But you can see where it's interesting. Like I mentioned, one time I was painting and I had some builder's foam beneath what I was spray painting, and I noticed that there was something on the foam. And when I spray painted, it left the impression of that and it ate away at it. And I realized immediately that I could do this sort of alternative relief process. So here you can see the finished product. We'll ink this up in a bit, but I just want to kind of walk you through some of the steps. So first of all, if I wanted to do my design, got some gesso here, I could paint an image entirely on this like so. And what's kind of cool is if you have a really rough textured brush, you can get some really nice brush strokes into the plate itself. You can get kind of the splaying of the brush strokes and the individual little lines, which I can show you an example of that here in this print that I made. Look at those brush strokes. You see that? That is from the gesso. Wherever I painted the gesso, it masked out the blue builder's foam. And then when I spray painted it, the spray paint ate away at the blue, but it did not eat away at the white painted gesso. You could use also acrylic paint for this, but I tend to find that gesso in its consistency lays really evenly on the surface, and you don't have sort of a buildup, a residual buildup of texture. The gesso just kind of evenly applies better. The other thing you could do when you're all finished making your plate is after you've spray painted it, you could prime the entire thing with either clear like matte gel, or you could use gesso to coat the entire plate so that way it inks up easier. So another thing that you could do is just drawing into it like this. You could use some painter's tape to mask an area out. And remember, if I mask this out like so, it's going to stay raised. And then the lower parts, the blue, the spray paint would eat away at them. This will stay raised, this will stay raised, and that will be the relief area that I can print. So I'm also going to put some texture on this. Like if you notice in these two prints here, notice the red section on here and then the teal section on here. Those are templates that I used and I just set on top of the paint, the builder's foam. So I could use something like this here as a texture and lay that on top of my plate, and wherever I set that, it's going to protect it. I could also put, say, a sheet of paper somewhere to block something off, which we will do right now. And I'm going to take this over to the spray booth, so you should still be able to see me. I'm going to turn the vent on. It's going to be a little bit louder. And I'll spray this, and you'll when I bring it back, you'll be able to see where the acidity of the spray paint ate away at the builder's foam, okay? So we'll see how this works with the gesso and everything. I'll be right back. You might want to wear gloves for this, if you have gloves. Otherwise, you'll just need to wash your hands really good afterwards. And I'm just doing an even coat, making sure it hits everywhere. I kind of do like a fine dusting and let that sit for a minute to see what it does. And you'll start to see that it'll kind of eat away at the builder's foam, right? How was that again? Well, it's like this. It kind of bubbles and eats into the builder's foam. And you can see that here, where it kind of looks like acid or a volcano has kind of come through. And these were the areas that were protected with tape. There was a template here, and then here there was a little bit of a texture piece as well. So this was my demo one, which we'll see if that is dry enough to print here in a minute. And then I'll show you this one. So at first I just do an even coating everywhere, and I'm using this gloss enamel. You can use any sort of spray paint. Some are more aggressive than others, so some work really, really quickly. Some are a little bit lighter. If you almost wanted to get like a gradation, you can just really lightly mist it, like shh, and it'll just do a fine little dusting of dots, or you could hit it closer and more aggressively. So now I'm going to do a second pass on this. And then I'm going to lift off the textures that I've applied, take off the textures and the tape. And you can see my plate that I've done. Now this eyeball here that I did and coated, it's taking a minute to work, but you can see really clearly where I've masked something out, and it creates a relief area. You kind of see it a little bit better from the side. See how it kind of bites down deeper into the plate. And here where this is protected, the gesso, even though it's blue, it's still raised up. So once this completely dries, I can print this. And I'm going to demonstrate that here in a minute on our second video. So tune in to that one to see how to print. So signing off, peace.